But you're the Pumpkin King.
Not anymore!
There are a few questions that we may never have the answer to, but one question has stumped the world the longest. Is The Nightmare Before Christmas a Halloween movie or a Christmas movie? Well, in today's video, I will not be answering that question because it is impossible to say, but what I can do is discuss the movie's history, and even some of the movie's characters' appearances outside of the original 1993 film. But before we begin, it would be greatly appreciated if you would leave a like, subscription, and maybe even a comment. Oh, and one more thing. I will be referring to The Nightmare Before Christmas as just Nightmare, because I'm going to be saying it a lot and it's kind of a long title. Alright, now let's get into the video. The original concept for Nightmare came from someone I've actually talked about before on this channel. Tim Burton, who in the 80s was an employee at Disney Animation Studios, and during his time with Disney in 1982, he wrote a poem that was sort of a parody of Christmas television specials, like How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and the myriad of other stop-motion Rankin Bass specials. And this poem's title was a twist on the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, which you probably know as The Night Before Christmas. And the poem that Burton wrote was titled The Nightmare Before Christmas. The poem tells the story of a skeleton named Jack Skellington, who has grown tired of Halloween. He then goes for a walk and comes across a door that transports him into Christmasland. After his time in Christmasland, Jack returns back to Halloweentown and devises a scheme where he would take over the role of Santa Claus during the next Christmas. So he kidnaps Santa Claus and begins to deliver presents in the real world. But he begins to deliver some disturbing gifts and the people do not like it. So he is eventually shot down by the military. After Jack gets shot down, Santa returns to him and pretty much tells Jack to stay in his own lane. Santa then leaves and tries to salvage Christmas, and Jack sadly returns to Halloweentown. But in the end, Santa returns to Halloweentown and spreads some Christmas spirit. After completing his story/poem, Burton was interested in turning the poem into a made-for-television special. The concept was eventually brought to Disney, who at first planned to turn it into a television special, but ultimately decided against it, after deeming the project too weird. In 1984, Burton was fired from Disney after completing work on the short Frankenweenie. Disney claimed that Burton had wasted the company's money by making a product that was too scary for children. In 1988, Burton went on to direct Beetlejuice and then Batman in 1989. And after the successes of both films, Disney was now naturally quite interested in turning the weird story about a skeleton who tries to take over Christmas into a full-length film, because even after all these years, they still own the rights to it. And like I said, even though it had been several years since Burton came up with the original concept, it was still a project that he thought about frequently. Tim Burton then went to Michael McDowell. Hey, look at that, someone else I've discussed on this channel before. Anyways, Burton went to Michael McDowell to turn the poem into an actual, story that could work as a full-length film. But the two had some disagreements on the script, and Burton ended up turning the film into a musical, with the help of Danny Elfman, who would provide the music, lyrics, and singing voice for Jack Skellington. Elfman began work on the movie's music before the script had even been completed. So what would happen was Burton would come to Elfman and give him the general idea for a scene. Then Elfman would make a song for the scene. Then they would move on to the next scene. Elfman would later state that making the music for the movie was one of the easiest jobs that he's ever had. Plot-wise, the movie's story was pretty much the same as the original poem, but all the characters except for Jack, Zero, and Santa were made just for the movie. So any part of the movie that included a character that was not one of those three was probably new and made just for the movie. In July of 1991, the movie began filming with Henry Selick as the director, with a budget of $24 million. And, confession time, I did not know until fairly recently that Tim Burton did not direct this movie. Now obviously the original story concept came from him, but due to him directing Batman Returns, and because he did not want to be involved with the slow process of stop-motion animation, he did not direct the movie. Nightmare used approximately 227 figures, and Jack Skellington himself had around 400 different heads, that each conveyed a different expression, and the figure of Jack was so thin and lanky that it had to be fastened to the ground, just so he would not fall over. That probably seems really random to mention, but I just kinda thought it was funny. Now, in case you don't know how stop-motion animation works, I'll give you a quick little rundown. So you take these figures, puppets, whatever you want to call them, and slightly move them. Then after each time you move them, you take a picture of them. And you keep on doing this over and over and over until you have some fluent movement. The movie's stop motion was filmed in 24 frames per second, so 24 pictures of the slightly moved figure had to be taken to give 1 second of movement. And it took about a week of filming to get 1 minute of footage. In all, almost 110,000 frames for the film were taken. And while filming a scene, if one frame, just one, had something off in it, the entire scene had to be filmed again. So just imagine, you work for hours on a scene, then whenever you watch over the scene, one of the character's movements were a little bit off, so the entire thing had to be done again. After being in development for over 3 years, the movie released in theaters on October 29th, 1993, with the title Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. The idea to put Burton's name in the title of the movie was a last-minute attempt by Disney to attract more people to the movie. The movie released under Disney's Touchstone Pictures film distribution label, which was used for movies that Disney considered too adult-oriented to be released under the actual Disney name. In Nightmare's case, Disney thought that the movie would be too scary for younger audiences. The movie made $50 million when it first released into theaters, which considering its budget of $24 million was not too shabby, but nothing spectacular either. Review-wise, the movie did well though, with most praising the movie's animation. Over the years, there has been continued talk about one day making a sequel or maybe even a prequel film, but so far nothing like that has ever happened. Now, even though a sequel film was never made, there have been other forms of media that continued the plot of the movie. The first major one was in 2004, in the Capcom-published video game, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Oogie's Revenge. In the game's plot, Oogie Boogie is brought back to life because he was, killed at the end of the movie. Anyways, Oogie Boogie is brought back to life and tries to become the ruler of all the holidays, so Jack stops his evil scheme again. In 2005, there was another video game based off of the movie that was released only for the Game Boy. And this game's story differs from the previous because this time it's a prequel. So what is this game's plot? Jack has to stop Oogie Boogie's evil scheme. What? Again with this? Can they not come up with something new? Make a new character or something, guys, come on. In 2022, yeah, I know I jumped up a lot there, but in 2022, there was a novel released titled Long Live the Pumpkin Queen, which continues the story after the events of the movie. Instead of it being about Jack, it follows Sally instead. Then in 2023, a graphic novel was released titled Battle for Pumpkin King, which serves as a prequel to the original film and explains how Jack became the Pumpkin King and how Oogie Boogie became evil. And my wish came true because in both of these stories, a new villain character was introduced. The Sandman in Long Live the Pumpkin Queen, and Edgar in Battle for Pumpkin King. The Sandman isn't really that interesting, but Edgar is, because he was the OG Pumpkin King, but eventually had to give up that title. Now, these are not the only stories that continue the plot of the movie, but best I can tell they are the most noteworthy ones. Now, there is one more thing I want to mention before ending this video, and it's about a theme park attraction. Been a while since I've talked about one of those. Every year since 2001, from the months of September to January, the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland is re-themed to The Nightmare Before Christmas. Seems like you would want to wait until after Halloween to do it, but okay. There were plans to do the re-theme in Walt Disney World in Florida. All the props were even created for it. But the plans were scrapped pretty much at the last minute, and all of the props were sent to Disneyland in Tokyo, where the Haunted Mansion over there gets re-themed every year. And there you have it. A brief look into the history behind Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. I say brief because there is just so much I could talk about. This video could probably be an hour long. So instead I just decided to give all the details that I considered to be the most noteworthy. But if you did enjoy this video, a subscription, a like, and maybe even a comment would be greatly appreciated. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.